Welcome back to the second part in my Pleasure Beach series, celebrating over 125 years of history. In this video, we will be looking at the historic rides that still operate in the park today. We're also going to be looking at some of the more quirky things and some of the historical facts that you may not know about the Pleasure Beach. One of the remains from the funhouse is still here today, and although it has been relocated many times, it's the Laughing Man. Its head was salvaged from the fire, and it was restored to haunt visitors for many more years to come. This was one thing that I always remembered as a kid from coming here to the Pleasure Beach, and it used to scare me back in the day, but not anymore. I find it rather endearing and part of the Pleasure Beach's history. So this is the park's miniature railway, which is known as the Pleasure Beach Express, and it's a 21-inch narrow gauge railway. It opened here all the way back in 1933, and it operates 3 engines on this line, all 3 of which were built at the Hudswell Clark in Leeds. And it also has a small maintenance loco called Barbie. The station burned down in 1934, just 1 year after opening. It was redesigned by Joseph Emberton in 1935, until it was replaced again in 1970 with this Victorian-looking facade. It used to run in the opposite direction to what it does today. Some of the scenery and signage along the route is still facing in the opposite direction, as can be seen here. The ride has had multiple layout changes over the years to accommodate new rides. And it also used to run through the tunnel that the big one currently uses. Here's some vintage footage of a train leaving the original Joseph Emberton style enclosed station. Blackpool Pleasure Beach is famous for its historical wooden roller coasters, and many of which still operate today, like this, the Big Dipper, that I'm stood right at the top of now. If you want to see more of this, join me in part 3, where we're going to head up the lift hill for the Big Dipper. Celebrating its 100th anniversary next year, the Big Dipper is a wooden out and back style coaster. The latter part of the ride was extended and modified in 1936 to take a different route. This was due to the park expanding further south. It is now designated as a Grade 2 listed building. The ride was first built by John Miller, and the extension works carried out by American engineer Charles Page. The station building was also designed by Joseph Emberton. Let's have a look at this old footage of the train returning back to the station and see if we can match it up today. Opened in 1935, the Grand National is now one of only 2 surviving wooden Mobius Loop roller coasters in the world, and the only twin-track racing coaster in Britain. If you have ever wondered how you start on one side of the station but end the ride on the other, well, that's due to the Mobius Loop. You leave the station on the left-hand side. Both tracks part separately and join each other again underneath the ride. You are now on the right-hand side of the track for the duration of the ride. This ride also has Grade 2 listed status. Built on the site of the old Velvet coaster and using its original lift hill, the roller coaster, now known as Nickelodeon Streak, opened in 1933. This is the more gentle of the three big wooden roller coasters on the park, and up until 2006 it didn't even have lap bars in the cars. It used to have an original car from the Velvet Coaster displayed in the station building. The Blue Flyer is a children's version of a wooden roller coaster. It opened here at the park in 1934 and is also Grade 2 listed. As mentioned in the first video, the flying machines, or Sir Hiram Maxim's captive flying machines to give its full name, opened as one of the earliest attractions still in existence at the park in 1904, and believed to be the oldest continuously operated ride in Europe. The prototype model of this ride appeared at Earl's Court in London in 1903. It was only 1 year later that it also appeared at the Pleasure Beach. Sir Hiram Maxim was better known for making early weaponry, but also the inventor of mousetraps and sprinkler systems. He turned to amusement rides as a way of funding his other passions. He invented the flying machines for a handful of parks around the world, including one that appeared at the Festival of Empire at the Crystal Palace. If you watched my previous series on the Crystal Palace, you would have seen it make an appearance in there. Most of his original amusement park designs have long since been demolished, but not at the Pleasure Beach. It's as cherished and popular at the park today as it ever was. The Flyers, as it's also affectionately known, features 10 rocket ships, although they used to be aeroplanes when it first opened. Believed to have been changed when space travel became more popular in the 1950s. It is believed that over 20 million people have experienced this ride over its lifetime, all 4 minutes of it, as it offers fantastic views across the park and still provides a very thrilling experience today. We will be delving into a more detailed look at how the ride operates in the next video, when we venture exclusively into the engine room with the park's Director of Operations. Alice in Wonderland, or Alice's Wonderland as it's actually called, opened at the park in 1962. It's a tracked dark ride for families and adults alike. It features scenes and characters from the famous Lewis Carroll books and takes you up and down across 2 levels inside and outside the building on your own Cheshire Cat vehicle. When Walt Disney visited the park looking for inspiration for Disneyland, he struck up a great friendship with the park owner at the time, Leonard Thompson. They shared ideas with each other, and in return, the Pleasure Beach were granted permission to use the Alice in Wonderland brand for the ride. With 56 horses, each one hand-carved at the Pleasure Beach, this ride opened in 1959. And here we can see from this rare footage the construction and testing of the ride on opening. It is now only one of 3 in the world of this type of large merry-go-round ride. It features its own 72-key Belgian organ that plays throughout the ride cycle. The Ghost Train opened in 1930 and was the first horror-type ride in the world. It's actually thought that this is where the name Ghost Train originates. Operating across 2 levels inside and outside, it features a large wooden drop in the centre of the station and a chain lift to transport you up and down the 2 levels. When it originally opened, it only operated on 1 level, and it was known as the Pretzel Loop Ride. It's also said to be haunted by a former worker on the ride who wore clogs, and he was called Cloggy. River Caves is a classic boat-style dark ride that opened in 1905. It was originally known as the River Caves of the World. It features various scenes depicting different countries and periods around the world. It has a narrated audio track that plays throughout the ride. The ride is built on one level, and it traverses underneath other attractions and buildings that are built above. And it also features a small splashdown element at the end of the ride. It is often said that this attraction was the inspiration for Pirates of the Caribbean at the Disneyland parks. The Grand Prix is a self-driven car ride that opened in 1960. Here is some rare footage of the ride being constructed and operating in its opening year. And used to have petrol-powered cars traversing the full layout. It now uses more energy-efficient electric vehicles. Although these rides aren't as historic as the rides mentioned already, they are definitely worth a mention. The Steeplechase is one of the more quirky rides here at the Pleasure Beach. It was opened in 1977 by the racehorse Red Rum, and it's also the only ride of this type left anywhere in the world. The Revolution ride is a shuttle roller coaster that opened at the park in 1979. It was Europe's first fully looping steel roller coaster. It traverses the ride from an elevated station, down the drop, through a loop and then up to the station on the other side. Then it does the same again, backwards. Avalanche is a steel bobsled type roller coaster that opened here in 1988. It was the first and still is the only bobsled roller coaster in the UK. Now, something worth mentioning, there was going to be a very, very large roller coaster here at the Pleasure Beach, even bigger than the big one, and I'm talking 2.5 times bigger than the big one. It was rumoured to be what they would call an intimate accelerator, and it was supposed to be situated right here where I'm stood now, but it never went through due to multiple problems. And right here you can see these 3 large circles here. They would have been where the base of the tower would have been situated, and they made the headland to fit it, but they never used it, so it's just left here now for no apparent reason. Now, if you were to stand outside the front of the Pleasure Beach, a lot of people don't know, but that tunnel under there is called Watson Road. Some people will know it because you can drive through it to get from one end of the park to the other. But what it actually is an old road that used to run through the park. The park started its life on the north side, which is this side here, and then as it gradually expanded over the years, it made its way further south. But during the period of the Pleasure Beach getting bigger and bigger and bigger and expanding, the council built Watson Road from one end of the park right to the other, right through the centre of it, of what it is today. So what you see now is the original road that used to run through the park. Only back in the day they used to embrace it, and you had to cross the road to get from one side to the other, but not anymore. We think in the late 50s they basically concreted over this and made an underpass for the road, and what you see today is the park is directly above us there. You make your way up in the centre of the park, cross it, and then you make your way back down on that side. So a lot of these rides, like the Big Dipper, they would have been situated right next to the roadside here. So you would have been able to walk down this road and get on the rides here, because back then it wasn't an enclosed park. This hidden underground world passing through the park without most people knowing it's even there. I'm now on the east side of Watson Road, just where it exits the back of the park. And right here again, you've got the roller coaster, or Nick Streak as it's called today, just there. Now this is the station building for the roller coaster, but you would have been able to access it here off the road and pay and enter and go on the ride here. And also the ice arena is right behind the camera here. You would have been able to enter the ice arena from this road as well. The park has kept up with the times and added more modern thrill rides. But at the same time, they have embraced the history. They have a nice mix of the old and the new. Now we're going to look at some of the more modern attractions to appear at the park from the 90s onwards. With more modern day additions, such as the big one in 1994. At the time it was the tallest and fastest roller coaster in the world, and put the Pleasure Beach firmly back on track as the UK's most visited attraction in the 90s. Infusion was opened in 2007. This ride was moved from their sister park at the time, in Southport. Snugly fit and built on top of the lake of the former log flume attraction it replaced, hence the name Infusion. And now their latest creation is Icon, the UK's first and only double launch roller coaster. This was a huge investment for the park and a great challenge to fit in such a long and complex layout amongst their many other rides, whilst at the same time not having to take anything away in order to make it work. I can't wait to see what the future holds for the park, and I'm sure they will do their very best to keep alive the historic attractions that they have, just as long as they are still relevant and viable with today's visitors. Well, I hope you enjoyed that look back at the classic rides at Blackpool Pleasure Beach and also some of the more recent additions. Join us in part 3, where we are taken behind the scenes by the park on some of the attractions.